Welcome everyone to IT Audit Webinar Training via Practical Application, presented jointly by AuditNet and Richard Cascarino and Associates. Today's webinar is part of the Training Without Travel series covering IT audit. My name is Jim Kaplan, founder and owner of AuditNet, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Joining us is Richard Cascarino, principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates, who will cover this 2-hour webinar on managing the IT audit function. Richard is joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa today. Let me have Richard introduce himself and give you a brief overview of his background, and then I'll cover the housekeeping items for today's webinar. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Welcome everyone to the webinar. For those who have been with us through the whole series, please forgive me while I introduce myself again. For those who are just joining us for this webinar, welcome. My name is Richard Cascarino. I'm the principal of Richard Cascarino and Associates, based out of Colorado, Steamboat Springs, and out of Johannesburg in South Africa. My background, I have 30 years experience in IT audit, IT audit training, and consultancy. I'm a past president of the Institute of Internal Auditors in South Africa, member of ISACA, member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and author of some books on internal auditing and IT auditing. And for those of you who've been with me for the rest of the series, you'll notice that the book on internal auditing has got a new cover. That's the 3rd edition, which has just arrived. Okay, let me hand you back to Jim, and he will take you through some of the housekeeping for today.
Thank you, Richard. Today's webinar is, we've sent out the slides this morning and you should have received those slides. We are recording today's webinar, so you will receive a link to that recording, and you will also be receiving a CPE certificate if you answer all the polling questions. As before, today's session does qualify for NASVA CPE, but you must answer all the polling questions. If you're joining us from a tablet device, you may not be able to respond to the polls, so if you could accumulate all of your answers into a single email and just send them to me, I'll record them in our records so that you will receive your CPE. Also, you will receive a link to an evaluation after the webinar, which is helping us to continuously improve our webinars, so please take a few minutes to respond to the questions. You can submit questions during the webinar via the chat box on your screen, and I will be monitoring those questions and will try to answer them when we break for a polling question, which is the best time. The next slide provides you with some disclaimer information. I'm not going to read the disclaimer information as it is in the slides that were sent out. So at this point, let me turn it back to Richard so he can get into today's topic and final webinar on managing the IT audit function. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. Well, welcome. As a kind of wrap-up for the full sessions of this series, we're going to go back to square one and start looking at what is IT audit, where does it sit within the organization, how do you get value for money out of your IT audit function, because it is an area which is, let's be honest, well paid and therefore expensive, and the organizations want to get the biggest bang for the buck that they can get. So we'll take a look at the scope of IT audit, narrowing our perspective and setting objectives, and then we'll take a look at the old problem that all managers have. Where do you get the staff? Do you develop them yourself? Do you recruit experts and bring them in? And on what basis? What kind of expertise do you need now and into the future? We'll take a look at the use of audit automation, on developing the skills, training them, and basically keeping yourself up to speed. It's one of the biggest problems I've had over the years, is that I chose to work in an environment, IT, which is constantly changing. So you have to run as hard as you can just to keep standing still. We'll take a look at how organizations measure the effectiveness of the IT audit function itself and the role of the specialist IT auditor. There's always a role for the specialist, because there are areas within the organization that you might only audit once every 2 or 3 years in depth, and it's not cost effective necessarily to retain those skills in-house and keep them up to speed. So maybe at that point you're going to bring someone in from the outside, maybe not. It depends on the organization and where it's going. So let's take a look at the IT audit function, setting up an IT audit function. We'll have a look at what it is, why have an IT audit function. The internal audit book, which the 3rd edition has just come out, is called Internal Auditing: An Integrated Approach, because the days when you could have a non-IT auditor are gone. They're past, they're over. Every auditor these days is going to walk into a business area and walk straight into a computer system. So if every auditor has to be able to take computers in their stride, why do we then need a specific IT audit function? How? How are we going to set it up? Where do we staff it? How do we set the scope? And how much is this thing going to cost us? So to look at what the IT audit function is, we need to go back to our audit mission. Okay? And the mission of audit in general is to look at reviewing, appraising for adequacy and effectiveness, and reporting on the soundness and adequacy and application of controls across the business. This isn't IT audit, this is audit in general. To ensure compliance with established policies, plans and procedures. Now those are internal things. The company decides what its policies will be, what its plans will be, what its procedures will be. To ensure the appropriate accounting for and safeguarding of corporate assets. And to make sure that things are done using the appropriate authority levels. We also need to review and appraise and report on the reliability of accounting and other data, the quality of performance of assigned duties, the extent to which different departments within the organisation coordinate, and overall the safeguarding of corporate interests. Now, I'm whizzing through that because that should be old hat to everyone. That's generically an internal audit mission. And that includes internal audit as an outsourced function using consulting and consultants. Now, if that's the audit mission, what then is the IT audit mission? Well, to a large extent, you can base it on the generic one. To review, appraise and report on the soundness, adequacy and application of IT operational standards. Now, that can be a difficult one. It depends on where those standards have come from and what they are and how they're being used. If you have gone for the general standards which are internationally accepted, if you've gone for ISO standards, ISO 27001 for security, or if you've gone for ISACA standards for COBIT, or if you're looking at standards through the G tags from the Institute of Internal Auditors, then you've got a standard that you can measure against. The problem is that ISACA, COBIT, and G tag from the IIA are standards that were developed by auditors, and therefore they've got credibility with auditors. They do not necessarily have credibility with IT. So you may well find that you walk into a situation where the standards that IT are working to are a different set of standards. And now you come along as an auditor and say, well, COBIT says you should be doing it this way. And management says we don't go with COBIT. We use ITIL. Ah, right. So when we look at the soundness, adequacy and application, it's got to fit the organization. And we cannot turn around and say one size fits all, we should always use COBIT. If operationally they're not using that, you need to look at the standards that are being used within IT and say, are they appropriate for the nature of IT as we run it, for the risk levels within our particular version of IT? We're looking at the soundness, adequacy and application of systems development standards if we're developing our own systems. If we're not developing our own systems, if we're using package solutions, there's still going to be a fair amount of systems development going on. Conversion programs, programs for loading information in to the application systems, tailoring of the application systems, selecting the operating parameters for the application systems. In general, remember when we talked about developing systems, we talked about outline specification, that's the business one, program specification, what we want the programs to do, code, test and implement, which was the bit that took all the time, testing, live running, ongoing maintenance. Now when you think about it, even if you're buying a package, the only thing you're actually cutting out is the coding part. We still have to do everything else. We still have to do a feasibility study, decide what we want it to do, decide which package would be appropriate, decide how that package is going to have to be tailored, tailor it, test it, link test it, go live, and then convert all of our systems onto that new system and maintain it from there on. So regardless of if IT turn around and say, but we only use packages. Yeah, but how do you know you're using the right one in the right way? Extent of compliance with corporate standards. And again, that comes back to whether they're going for their own inbuilt, in-house developed standards, or taking a standard, an internationally recognized standard, and tailoring that for the corporate requirements. Obviously, we have to worry about security, but we also have to worry about the overall security of the corporate IT investment. We talked on the last one about getting value for money out of our IT function. We put the money in. Will we continue to get value for money out? We'll also have to review and appraise and report on the adequacy of contingency arrangements. Now that includes our disaster recovery plan, but it also includes those contingencies which says things like, we have a problem and it may not be a computer disaster. What do you do if the staff go on strike? There was an interesting one a few years back. Many years ago, before I came across to South Africa from the UK, I was an IS manager, and the civil service had a union called NALGO, the National and Local Government Officers Union. And NALGO went on strike. And NALGO put a picket line around all of the government buildings in the UK. Unfortunately, they had an agreement with the Trade Union Council that no other union would cross any other union's picket line. And since NALGO was part of the civil service, they put a picket line round their own building. Now, the people who ran IT for the union were members of DATA, the Data Processors Union, and they were not allowed to cross the picket line of another union, i.e. NALGO. So they were not allowed to cross into the NALGO building, which meant they couldn't run the NALGO payroll. So nobody in NALGO, nobody in the union could get paid because the union itself had a picket line around its own building. Now, that's a difficult one. How are you going to get around that one? So again, as a contingency arrangement, what they ended up doing was they took the payroll that they'd run the previous week and simply told the bank, pay everyone what we paid them last week. and we'll sort out overtime and new arrivals and all the rest of it when we get back in the building. But that's a contingency arrangement, nothing to do with the disaster recovery plan. We'll review, appraise and report on the completeness and accuracy of a computer processed information, because this is potentially life-threatening to the organization if we get this wrong. Whether optimum use is being made of all computing resources. Are we using sledgehammers to crack nuts? Do we really need all of that power? And if so, are we using it for the right things? When we do develop application systems themselves, are they going to work? Are they going to hang together? Do we have quality assurance in place? And it's a danger one for internal audit on the IT audit side, because if you're not very careful, IT will pass you the buck and you will become quality assurance for IT. And I've seen it happen in a large bank where IT turned around to internal audit and said, we need you to sign off on this new system. And internal audit said, hang on a second, what do you mean sign off? Sign off that it's working and you're happy with it. He said, whoa, we haven't seen your testing. Well, if you don't sign off, we're just going to have to tell management that the system's going to be late because internal audit won't sign off on it. When you sign off on a system, you make very clear that what you're signing off on is you have seen evidence that everyone else has done everything else they're supposed to do. You are not signing off on the soundness of any application system that is being developed. So what could we do as IT audit? Well, one of the more common ones is installation reviews. Here we're looking at the physical installation. We're looking at the adequacy of security controls on the physical building, on fire protection, etc. It's a fairly easy one to do because you can walk up to things and touch them. And if you're in a bad mood, you can walk up to things and kick them. But they're there, they're physically there. That's probably one of the easier ones to do. You're looking for what are the standards, show me what's supposed to be there, where it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to work, show me that it works, show me that someone's keeping it maintained, thank you very much, I'm out of here. System reviews, the bread and butter of IT audit. This is not looking at systems being developed, this is looking at the systems which are running to make sure they are running as intended by the user, delivering what was intended by management, and basically that they're continuing to work. We could be asked to look or be involved in the process even of a system which is under development. And it's important, a lot of auditors try to stay away from that, auditing systems under development, because they say, if I audit it now and make recommendations, what happens to my independence if I come back to audit this thing when it's live? How can I audit something that I recommended? And it's something that the IT audit's got to get its head around, that at the end of the day, which is more crucial to the organization? That the systems function in a well-controlled manner as intended and deliver what is supposed to be delivered, or that your IT audit can function independently. And I would argue the systems are the critical element. If you are involved in a system which is being developed, then everyone has to understand that you are not there as an auditor, you're there as an internal control consultant. And if you are the most knowledgeable person within the organization on internal controls, that is an appropriate role for you to play. What it means is that when the system comes to be audited, you personally cannot audit that system. Now, in fact, you could audit the system and say, listen, those controls are not functioning as they were intended to, you've not implemented them properly or whatever. But the presumption is that your independence could be impaired. So all that means is you get another auditor to audit the system, whether you bring someone in from outside or someone internally. You could be asked to audit the development process. Now that's exactly the same as any operational auditor auditing any operational development process, whether you're designing a building or building a bridge or building a computer system. You're looking at what internal controls management is relying on to make sure they get the job specified at the right price, at the right time, in the right quality. We could be asked to audit the contingency planning arrangements, whether it's a full-blown disaster recovery plan or any other form of contingency planning. Other tasks for the IT audit function, commonly to provide in-department expertise. Your other auditors, be they integrated or not, are going to hit complications within user areas because of the use of IT. They're using something in the cloud. Can we rely on that? They're going to come to the IT audit function and say, that's beyond me. They should come to the IT audit function and say, that's beyond me. If they don't, either they're assuming everything's okay, or they're overskilled for general audit and you should move them into the IT audit function. You may be involved in training non-IT auditors, non-specialist auditors. You may be called on to assist in computerizing the internal audit function itself, to start getting technical, to review logical security. And reviewing logical security is a complicated issue, requiring specialist skills because it depends on the environment and the architecture that's being used in your organization. If you are an expert in Windows on local area networks, that does not mean you can walk in on a mainframe and understand the security concepts within that. If you're an expert on a mainframe, it doesn't mean to say that you can handle a cloud environment. And the other one, of course, is to liaise with external IT audit functions. Now, either, in many cases, they will be placing reliance on the work that you've done, or you may be placing reliance on the work that their specialists have done. But one way or the other, you may be liaising with them to make sure that nothing is duplicated and everything is actually being done. I had an experience some years ago when I worked for an audit firm, and we had to go into a bank and do an IT security review, technical review of the logical security. And I walked in to meet with the head of IT, and he said, "Oh God, not again." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Will you co-audit this with another firm of auditors?" Yes. Well, they were in last month doing the same thing. Now you've come to do it, and I'm scheduled to have internal audit do another 2 months down the line, the same thing. Can you guys not get together? So I went back and spoke to my boss and said, "Listen, they've already done it." He said, "Yep, but we can't rely on what they've done. We have to do it ourselves." External auditor standards. The work of the external auditor is indivisible. If we're going to express an opinion, we must do the job ourselves. I said, "Well, could we not review their working papers and what they've done and be happy with it or not happy with it?" He said, "No, they won't give us the working papers because it's confidential to them." Oh, I said, "Well, next year, could the three of us get together and do it as one joint exercise?" So one of the jobs for IT audit, to make sure that everything is not being duplicated and paid for 3 times. As far as installation reviews, how would you start? Well, you could start off by looking at the hardware and software that you've got compared to your hardware-software acquisition policies. Do you have laid down procedures, laid down preferred suppliers, laid down to fit with your architecture? I have seen one site where, this is going back many, many years, where they bought some key to tape equipment. Now that sounds fine, it was replacing a punch card machine. Problem was that the equipment they bought was not compatible with all of the hardware. So the tapes could not be read by the machine that they had. And when I couldn't ask the boss because I worked for him, but when I asked one of the other guys, why the hell did we buy that? He said, because the sales lady had a very nice smile. And unfortunately, that does happen. You'll find kit lying around in many IT installations that should never have been bought, that is now obsolete, that has never been used. We can do a review of the organization, staffing and reporting structure of the IT department, whether you're talking about the operations area or the project-based functions or the technical support. We could be auditing any one of those, looking at what are their objectives, what are their requirements, what are the staff requirements, do they have the right mix of skills, do they have enough bodies? We could review the development of new application systems or the maintenance of existing systems. We could do reviews of change control and problem management. All of that could come under the heading of installation review process. In addition, we could get into our system software. Now, we're not talking about doing, at this level, a review of the technical security within our system software. We're looking at how that software is acquired. There was an organization some years ago in the States thought that their operating system had been hit by a virus. Now they're running DECVAX computers running the VMS operating system. And they thought, well, we better get this checked out, so they called in DEC to have a look at it. And right enough, there was a virus in there. DEC found it and sent them a bill for about $2.5 million. And they threw up their hands in horror and said, oh, what's this $2.5 million? I said, oh, no. About $5,000 of that is for finding the virus and removing it. The rest of it is for all of the pirate copies of the operating system that you're running on your other 20 installations, because you only bought one. So, part of the implementation of system software, make sure what you've got is legal. That was a large organization. Control over the operations function, physical security over the corporate IT assets. Again, it's one of these funny ones that you think, nah, they're not going to do that. We worry about people stealing notebook computers, etc. We had a case in South Africa where they came in on a Monday and the mainframe was gone. They'd stolen the mainframe. And it's not the only organization that that's happened in. IT's role in the corporate survival plan. Now, this is not looking at the IT disaster recovery plan. This is looking at the corporate survival plan and where IT fits, and has that been thought through and thought out. We can audit compliance with statutory requirements and legal requirements. I was called in by one client in America. It was a bank, and the bank examiners had been in and said, everything in the IT division is wonderful, no problems at all. And head of internal audit said, no way. I know there are problems in there, I'm just not sure what they are. And they called me in to do a review of them, and we ripped the thing apart. There were some major compliance problems. So compliance can be a significant area for IT audit to work in. System reviews, typical audit function, 4 basic phases. Gaining an understanding of what the system is, what it's intended to do, how it was put together, who's running it, who's maintaining it, evaluating the controls, testing the key controls and reporting back. Nothing different. This is what you would expect every auditor to be able to do within any business area. Slightly more technical, auditing the systems under development to ensure that the appropriate controls, operational controls, are being designed into the system, that the designed-in controls are in fact being implemented, that the implemented controls do in fact do the job that was intended. Because when a system is being developed, that's when you put the controls in. When they turn around and say, no, we'll put that in later, never happens. Control retrofit very rarely happens. So we can be auditing a system while it's being developed, or we can be auditing the development process itself to ensure a quality system on time within budget in a controlled environment. As far as the in-department expertise is concerned, it depends on how sophisticated your audit function is. When I first started in audit, and this is going back a few years, one of the key audit tools that I had in my briefcase was a soldering iron. Because 9 times out of 10, when an auditor came to me and said, this computer's not working, it was because a wire had broken somewhere and it just needed to be soldered. Now, I do not suggest that you do that as auditors. This is not your job, that's IT's job. But I had come from an IT background, and my reaction was, if it's broken, fix it. Okay. From an audit perspective, what I should have done is say, it's broken, get somebody to fix it. We're trying to build a professional reputation for the organization, for the audit function, to assist them gain credibility when they walk into IT so they don't look a complete set of idiots. To give them assurance on IT-related concerns, and overall to be part of the team. There's a danger, because you have specialist skills, that the IT auditor ends up in an ivory tower somewhere, and you're no longer part of the team. As far as training non-IT auditors are concerned, you could be training them in IT-related control concerns, what they should worry about, in the IT controls themselves, what they are, how they work, possibly in the audit use of computers if you've got generalized audit software. Then it may fall to the IT auditor to be trained themselves to a higher standard, and then to run training for the other auditors in the use of that software. Provision of IT consultancy to users, and their role in the audit of computer systems. Training the non-IT auditor and what their role is. As far as computerization of the internal audit function is concerned, there's all kinds of things that we can do. We can look at productivity tools, audit planners. It's amazing. When we look at productivity tools, the number of auditors who say, I need a tool that will help me work faster, work more productively. I need a faster computer because I can't get through all my work. And when I ask them, what kind of work do you use the computer for? Well, I use it for Excel spreadsheets, right? And I use it for writing reports, And do you use voice recognition? What's that? It's amazing. Windows has had it built in, either into word processors, into MS Office, or built in to Windows itself, voice recognition in there, free of charge, and it's been there for about 15 years now. And still there are auditors who don't know it's there. I'm in the middle of writing my 4th book. From day one when I wrote my first one, I don't type it, I can't type. I dictate it. I put on a pair of headsets, the same as I've got on just now, and I just talk to the computer and it recognizes my voice and brings it all up. If you want to improve your productivity and throughput in writing reports, in writing working papers, even in writing emails, start using voice recognition. Use of word processors, spreadsheets, graphical systems, CATs of all kinds, data retrieval packages, data download software, data manipulation software, process verification software. All of these potential areas where the internal audit function could utilize in an effective way. Then we come to the more specialist tasks. And the specialist tasks would include such gems as reviewing logical security. Now that's possibly one of the most complicated areas that the IT auditor can work in, to actually look at the logical security within the environment, within the operating system, within the communication systems. All of these potential areas that will have to be at some point audited. We can look at IT strategic planning. And again, you need a degree of IT expertise so that you can go in and say to management, why are you doing it that way? You do realize there's another way to do it. Reviewing efficiency and effectiveness, reviewing communication systems, reviewing the IT technical support function. To review the technical support function, you have to get them on your side to the extent that they believe that you know what you're talking about. And that means you need to know their environment. And that is a specialist task. And that brings us to our first polling question. And our first polling question for tonight says the scope of IT audit would normally include all except. Please vote now. Remember, you don't have to get it right, but if you want your CPE, you do have to vote. And again, if you're working from a tablet and you can't interactively vote, save your answers to the end and send them in one email to Jim. And it will be recorded against you. And we are finished, so I will close. I'll share the results. Either the questions are getting easier or you guys are getting smarter, 100%. Okay. So let me close the poll and hide it and go back. So how are we going to set up this function? How are we going to organize it? Well, typically it could be within the corporation, it could be external to the corporation. It could be reporting independently, or it could be part of internal audit. In all cases, we need adequate authority for access. Now, that's often easier to get if you are an insider than an outsider. But regardless of whether you're inside or outside, the reporting of the function is going to be within the overall structure. Question then is, how many? How many? How are we going to structure this whole thing? And it's a question I keep getting asked by auditors to say, we are a bank with this size, how many IT auditors should we have? And that's like saying, how long is a piece of string? I did ask that in a course one time, how long is a piece of string? And I got the correct answer. One guy stuck his hand up and said, it's exactly twice the length from one end to the middle. And it's hard to kind of argue with that one. So, how big do you need to be? The answer is big enough. It's going to be a factor of size, not necessarily the size of the organization, but perhaps the size of your IT function, perhaps the complexity of your IT function. It's a decision. Do you need generalist IT auditors or specialist IT auditors? If you need specialists, how many? Do you need them in-house? Are you going to bring them in when you need them? How complex are your systems? If you develop them in-house, they are unique to your organization, so you're not necessarily going to be able to go out and bring in consultants with those specific skills. Many years ago, I was involved in, it was actually a share issue. And I was asked to audit the share issue process. Now, the system they were using was an ancient COBOL system. And in COBOL, if you were writing a program in COBOL, there was one COBOL statement that most installations banned totally. It was called the alter statement. And what the alter statement did when you were running the program was, as it was running, it would say 2 plus 2 equals, or A plus B equals C. But halfway through the processing, you could alter that statement to say A plus B equals D, or A plus B equals C minus 1. You could make it say anything you wanted. Now that was generally banned, because if it's that, you can go through the program and you actually have no idea if it will continue to run the way you think it's running. Now that particular installation had one guy who knew how the system worked. When they landed the contract for this particular IPO, he immediately resigned and came back as a consultant. And over the course of 3 weeks, he got enough to buy a brand new BMW. Because the system was so unique and so old that there was no documentation that you needed specific expertise. Now, I was fortunate when they brought me in, because many years ago, I was a COBOL programmer. So I could actually make sense of this system. The use of package systems. If we're using primarily package systems, if you're using a big integrated package, if you're using SAP, then I may want to get an IT auditor with SAP experience. We can look at the computer audit manager. Where are we going to get him? Do we need one? A separate one? Application auditors, will they be part of IT audit or will they be part of our integrated auditors? What about trainees? What about audit application development staff? If we are going to use the ideas of this world or the ACLs of this world, are we going to have specific audit programmers who are going to develop specific scripts for us to run? And do we need to retain in-house our own technical support for the audit function? If we look at the skills, what do we need for an IT audit manager? We need specialized skills in auditing, specialized skills in computer auditing, managerial skills for running a department, and knowledge of your organization. Now the IT manager, the IT audit manager, their job is to set the strategic direction for the section, to set the priorities, and to handle that liaison with the rest of the internal audit function, liaison with the user functions, liaison with IT management, and liaison with external audit, and liaison with all of the other external agencies that they may have to liaise with. Obviously, as a manager, their job to review and approve all of the work of their function, which in this case is IT audit. Controlling and monitoring the workflow and deciding how they are going to staff their department. What roles will they have? Where am I going to get the staff? What those staff should be able to do? What kind of training will we give them? Do we do it in-house? Do we do it using webinars? How on earth do I motivate staff? And how do I plan the career in an IT audit function? This is a difficult one for management, okay? Because many IT auditors started off in IT. They were seconded into audit, either temporarily or permanently, found they liked it, and stayed. Now, where do you take an IT auditor? What do? You make them a senior IT auditor. We only need one senior IT auditor. Maybe they will become a specialist, maybe they won't. If they become a specialist IT auditor, do you have enough work to keep that person interested? Because if you don't, you're going to lose them. When they come through the end of that, where do they go? Where do they go within the organization? They cannot go back into IT because the people they worked with, they've been auditing for the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And they now have 4 years more IT experience than the IT auditor does. So they're not going to come in, go back into IT at a higher grade. So for many of them, the only option is then to leave the organization. So it's a role IT management, IT audit management has to consider, what am I going to do with these people for a career? How do I motivate them? How do I give them a career structure? How do I retain their skills in-house? As far as IT audit as the support function is concerned, we may be the ones who are developing the CATs, helping the non-IT auditors, training them, developing our own internal computer control procedures. Is bad enough if you go into a business area and you say, show me your disaster recovery plan, or we don't have one. Shock, horror, you don't have a disaster recovery plan. And then the next thing is the internal audit computers crash and you've got no backups. So you better have a well-controlled environment, because guaranteed the external auditors are going to look at your internal controls to decide, can they place reliance on your comments regarding the IT audit, the IT functions internal controls. By the same token, one of the things that you have to do as a support function is keep yourself and your department up to speed in both IT and IT audit techniques. Where the company is now is not where they're going to be 6 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. So you need to know where they're going to go, you need to know what the control implications are, and you need to research the IT audit techniques which will allow you to assist the audit function match those needs. As far as the structure is concerned, you could go for a centralized structure, and that's very common with smaller organizations where you do not have the requirement for a large number of IT auditors. Will hold them at head office. Centralized, they're independent from local management. They've got close ties to corporate management. They've got flexible availability. You can punt them into whichever area that you need within the organization. But when they go in there, they're going to be seen as an outsider. They're coming from head office. In a larger organization, it may be more efficient or effective for each division to have its own IT auditors. Advantage, you've got close ties at local levels with an enhanced perception of benefits. They're on tap when we need them. A better understanding of the business function of that local part of the business. But danger, potential loss of objectivity because you know all the people, and the standardized audit approach may go out the window. You can find some departments where they go for a hybrid approach, where they've got generalists out in the field and technical support at head office. So the technical IT auditors are held centrally, the generalist IT auditors are out in the field where they're needed, but the generalists getting rotating through the head office to keep them up to speed with everything that's being developed. There's an argument that says that gives you the best of both worlds. There's another argument that says it gives you the worst of both worlds. You end up with a fragmented audit effort and loss of cohesion. It's a potential danger. And that brings us to our second polling question, which looks at the advantages or not of a centralized IT audit function. Centralized IT audit function offers the following advantage: closer ties at local level, better understanding of the business process, seen as an insider, independence from local management. We're looking for the benefits of centralized IT audit. Five more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll close and share the results. And as you can see, the majority of people have gone for independence from local management. And that's one of the advantages of having your own centralized function. Better understanding of business functions, yes, at the corporate level, no at the operational level. At the operational level, you know what is supposed to be happening. You don't necessarily know what is happening. Okay, let us press on. We now know what we want our audit department to do. We've now got the management in place. Question is, where you're going to get your staff. The specialist staff, commonly drawn from IT ranks. It may not be your own IT ranks, it may be somebody else's, but it's a common area where we get specialist IT auditors. They may have been a programmer or a systems programmer, a technical person within IT. There's a danger if you get it from your own staff. Number one, if they're a technical specialist, you may have lost your independence in reviewing the technical area. You may not be able to use that person as a technical auditor for a period of time until that independence issue gets flushed out by time. Second one is if you go to IT and ask them to give you someone, who does IT want rid of? Their best people or the worst people? Think on it. But it's a source, potential source, to take an IT person and train them in audit. If you're going to do that, they're going to need a variety of experience, because whatever experience they've got in IT within a few years is going to become obsolete unless it's kept up to speed. So a variety of experience in a variety of environments. And you'll see that it says, but check their track record. It may well be that they've got variety of experience in a variety of environments, because every time they get found out, they have to move. Okay, it doesn't mean to say they're actually competent in each of those environments. Generalist staff usually recruited from within audit, and that can be a good training ground for the future specialists. The idea being to train in interpreting good control techniques, which we understand from general audit, into an IT matrix. These are the bulk of the IT audit function. And these are the guys who understand IT jargon, user jargon, auditor jargon. They can fill the gaps. So, Where do you start? First steps in recruiting, decide what you want to do. If in doubt, go back and look at the bit that says IT audit mission. Decide on the level of staff that you require. If in doubt, go back and see the bit that says organization of the function. And then plan a staff acquisition policy. It's not going to happen by accident. You're going to have to plan this out. Sources of specialist staff. You may be able to get them from the competition. That's a good one. You've got an excellent specialist and they've lost an excellent specialist. Could be from the IT department. A lot of companies use recruitment agencies. The danger with recruitment agencies is they don't necessarily understand specialist IT unless you're using a specialist agency. You could advertise. You could get them from your external auditors. Not a way to win friends and influence people. Okay, many external audit firms have got clauses in their employment contracts for their staff that says you will not accept a position from one of our clients for a 3-year period after you leave us. Okay. Generalist staff, again, we can get from the competition. You can advertise for IT auditors. You can get from the accounts department. If you're doing accounts auditing, get them from the accounts department. If you're doing engineering IT auditing, maybe your engineering department could provide them. Again, recruitment agencies advertising your external auditors as a potential. What about training? Well, you can get training from virtually everywhere. The Institute of Internal Auditors in South Africa, we've got the Computer Society of South Africa. You can get them from ISACA. You can get them from the ACFE. You can even get them from hardware and software vendors. If you're going to do technical auditing on IBM equipment, go to IBM and get trained. It could be internally, it could be externally. You can go to AuditNet. If you are really, really, really stuck, Richard Cascarino and Associates do in-house training, webinar training, remote training. IT or audit? Difficult. You bring them from IT and make them auditors, or audit and make them IT people. If you're going to try and get them from IT and bring them in, the immediate effectiveness is normally going to be low. There's not that many experienced IT auditors around, and there's not that many developed by tertiary education. I was involved with one of the universities in South Africa setting up a higher diploma 2-year qualification specifically in IT audit. And I assisted one of the universities here develop a master's degree in IT auditing. But there's not that many worldwide that actually do that kind of qualification in IT audit. You may have no choice. In-house developed may be your only choice. And it's very tempting to turn around and say, okay, let's set up an IS audit function or an IT audit function. Remember, whatever the IT specialist is doing today, the generalist will be doing in a couple of years' time. And it's an accelerating trend. So the IT or IS auditor has to be more than simply a technician. It's got to be someone who's capable of handling a management role, because this person is going to be negotiating with management. What attributes do you need? Number one, intelligence. That should go without saying, I hope. A business education, specifically in the business of your organization. A computer education, specifically in the equipment and architecture that you're using. A general inquisitiveness. A general nosiness. My wife is also a certified internal auditor. She was on the board of regents for the IIA and set the CIA examinations. And her father once told me that she was born to be an auditor. For those of you who have children, you will realize that by the time they get to the age of 2 or 3, all you get is questions, 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 questions. And she was one that was always asking questions. And he got fed up one day and he said, for goodness sake, don't you know that curiosity killed the cat? And she thought about this for a few seconds and she said, what did the cat want to know? You've got to have that inquisitiveness that says you keep digging. Never believe what the first printout tells you, particularly if you wrote the program. An ability to look at computer systems, user areas, and perceive relationships in the systems. You need a certain degree of salesmanship, because the first thing you're going to have to sell is yourself. You need writing skills, because much of our communication is done in writing. It helps if you've got actual computer experience. A willingness to try new techniques, and as I said before, you've got to be bilingual in finance and computerese, because you're talking to computer people who do not understand finance, and finance people who do not understand the computer, or engineering people who don't understand computers. Training will help, but you need that experience, and the only way to get it is on the job. So on-the-job assistance is useful if possible. Where do you start? Well, start with something you know. You know the business? Let's start with a business system. So we'll start off with an application system audit to gain more experience. The auditor will know when you need more training. When you're in an area and you think, I really don't know what I'm doing here, that's when you definitely need more training. So that's when you look around to see, where can I get the training? And the training may be from a more experienced auditor. Whenever I do consultancy work for companies, I try to get them to bring their audit function in on it, so that when I walk away, if they're working with me, when I walk away, there's been a skills transfer and they can now take it from here and run with it. There has to be that skills transfer. The objectives of training: to minimize the shortage of IT auditors. If you can't get them, build them. To assist meeting management's control requirements. Improve our efforts. Maintain the state-of-the-art knowledge, because this thing is moving so fast. Maintain a unified body of knowledge. Now what that means, that within any audit function for IT audit, a training plan should exist, should cover the varying degrees of expertise that will be required now and into the future for the organization, should be practical, focus on needs and not be rigid. Different kinds of training. You can get hands-on training, you can go to seminars, you can come to webinars, you can buy audio-visual programs, you can buy books. We seem to have stopped using books these days. We expect everything to be spoon-fed to us. You can, and for certain areas, get computer-based training. So let's assume that we've got our people. All we need to do now is keep them. We need to retain our staff. We spent a fortune buying them in and training them up. And we're spending even more money with more time to keep them constantly updated on the latest. So how do you get them to be motivated? Well, there's a pile of theories that are around. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's needs as a source of motivation, moving from an unsatisfied tension state via goads and guides to whatever that goal object is, on the basis that water flows downhill. Maslow's hierarchy of needs has taken a hammering as motivational theories go over the years, but funnily enough, it does seem still to work. Many people operate at different levels within different parts of their lives. In the professional life, they may be in one area. In the private life, they may be in another area. The hierarchy of needs starts off with basic needs, where we need to satisfy our need to eat, safety, sex is a basic need under Maslow's hierarchy. Once they are satisfied, once you've eaten today, then you start worrying about, will I eat tomorrow? So now security kicks in as a need. When you're starving, you're not worried about tomorrow, you're worried about today. When you've eaten today, now you worry about tomorrow. Once you're happy that you're eating and everyone else is eating, now you can worry about, what about all my friends? Are they eating as well? So you now move into the social needs. Some people work from an esteem need. They want to be seen to be the leader. Other people work with self-actualization. Self-actualization is a very hard one to define. It's those people who work because they choose to work. Very, very hard to motivate someone who's actually self-actualized, because you cannot offer them anything. They will decide themselves what will motivate them. You need to find out as a manager what motivates that person and then provide it to them. And that brings us to our third polling question. A good place for a new auditor to start would be with an operating system review, an application systems audit, physical security review, review of the hardware acquisition process. Please vote now. That's got you thinking. This is where you would start a brand new IT auditor. What's the first audit you're going to get them to do? To which the answer probably should be whatever's required. Okay, everyone's voted. I will close it and share the results. Generally speaking, it's taken to be an application systems audit. If the person coming in is a conventional auditor who understands auditing the business, then an application systems audit is the easiest way for them to feed in, because they already understand how the business works, how that business function works, and therefore hopefully they're simply superimposing on it how the computer system assists that business function in its working. An operating system review is probably too technical for a beginner. Physical security review might be a good way of starting if they don't know anything about your business. A review of the hardware acquisition process, again, could be a good place to start, because you could simply be doing a compliance audit, which is one of the easiest audits to actually do. So, as the man said, it depends. So, we're now going to take the role not only as an auditor, but as assisting the internal audit function get itself up to speed. We're going to automate it. Why? Because that will improve our efficiency and effectiveness, at least in theory. It will increase our audit coverage. It will allow us to increase our analytical capabilities, improve the quality of our audits, enforce consistent applications of our audit procedures, increase our cost effectiveness and gain greater audit credibility if it works. So all of that sounds good in theory, and it sounds good when you're trying to put together a justification for management to spend money on equipment and software for IT audit. What do we really mean? Well, in general, technology has become an essential for fulfilling our audit objectives. When you walk in and everything is computerized and there is no paper audit trail, you can either follow an electronic audit trail or you cannot audit. Then it becomes essential that we use technology to conduct the audits, because otherwise you cannot fulfill your objectives. And that means that the auditors themselves have to be computer literate. We're seeing the paper trails are fast disappearing. When you go out into the cloud, they're gone. So without automation, audit evidence simply will not be available. Without automation, the volumes will be unhandleable. You cannot do a big data audit without using the computer. And automation gives less skilled staff the capability of using advanced techniques. Unfortunately, that's not always a good thing. The problem with using advanced techniques is you have to do it right. Okay? And you have to know what it means when you've done it. And if the auditor can execute the test but doesn't know what the results mean, then they can come to totally the wrong conclusions. Computerizing the audit itself does not necessarily mean computerizing the old techniques. Okay, we can go for new audit approaches. There's a pile of new techniques and new types of systems over and above straightforward data extraction, which are now possible. And that can make internal audit much more attractive as a career. And it can therefore improve your staff's stability. A lot of staff leave audit to go to another organization simply because they're using more advanced audit techniques. So what do we need? As close a ratio as possible of computers to auditors. We've gone beyond the stage of saying every auditor must have a mobile device. We've all got smartphones, cell phones, etc. But if you want the auditors to understand the computers, they have to be using them. So it's not just a question of how many boxes you've got. It's what are you using those for? We need the support of both audit and IT, and we need user-friendly systems. The objective of the exercise in automating and computerizing the audit function is not to turn every auditor into a computer auditor. So they don't need to be a computer specialist to use these tools. We need practical, hands-on training with effective support, both at the operational level and at the technical level, and that's where perhaps our specialist auditors can come in. Developing CATs themselves need not necessarily be an immediate priority. For a start, you're going to need expertise to develop them, and you're going to need expertise to interpret the results. And you can trip over your own feet if you're not careful. And you can blow the credibility not just of you yourself, but of the whole audit function, simply by using CATs in an inappropriate way. And it may not even be cost effective to do it. Where it is cost effective, we should be doing it. Where it's not, we shouldn't. So the question is, how do you know whether you should be doing it or not? How are you going to measure the benefits of computerizing the audit? It may reduce costs. Probably won't. It may increase our audit scope. Not necessarily. The scope will probably stay the same. Your ability to fill that scope might increase. But those are typically the two that we try to justify computerization based on. We're going to reduce the cost and we'll increase the scope of audit. In addition to the straightforward cost-benefit analysis, have a look at improvements in audit quality. We'll be able to operate at far higher confidence levels when we interrogate using the computer. We can reduce our audit risk. Our audit risk is the risk that the audit that we carried out doesn't actually meet the information that we need. We audited the wrong things, possibly because it was going to be difficult to audit the right things. Well, we can make it easier to audit the right things. We can increase our audit efficiency. Now, remember what we talked about with efficiency? The amount of work we can do for the consumption of resources. So either we can do the same amount of work with less resources if we computerize, or we can use the same amount of resources and do a lot more auditing and be more efficient. We can also increase our effectiveness because there are areas that we can audit using the computer that physically it's impossible to do without using the computer. We can increase our audit opportunities because there are areas within the organization that in the pre-IT audit phase just could not be looked at, so we didn't even bother to try. We can improve timeliness and we can achieve broader objectives. Now, those are all we can. It doesn't mean to say we will. So when you're trying to justify increasing your IT staff, increasing their training, increasing the software, increasing the hardware, think about the needs of the audit function. What is actually needed by the audit function? Is it more effective coverage? Is it better risk evaluation? Is it more efficient audits? More technical coverage? In order to decide what do you want, how many auditors, whether they should be technical, whether they should be business oriented, management has to define the audit universe, assess the audit requirements, and identify potential IT solutions. It should not be the first option. If we look at IT as an audit management tool, what can we use IT for at the IT audit management level? Well, we can use it as an audit management tool, a planning tool for developing the audit plan. Now, you could be using something like AMP, which is a package for auditors. You could be using something like Project Manager, Harvard Project Manager. You could use Microsoft's Project Management. It can help you develop the plan, develop a detailed audit schedule, developing and managing human resources. The problem comes when you start getting so tied into the technology that the technology becomes more expensive than doing it any other way. There was a friend of mine many years ago, worked for Southern California Edison, a guy called Gil Kutamanch, and he wrote a book on managing the internal audit function. And one whole chapter was devoted to implementing Audit Master Plan, which was developed originally by the Research Foundation for the Institute of Internal Auditors. And Gil was an expert on that, and he should be, because that was his full-time job, was just to run Audit Master Plan. And he estimated that you needed to have 30 auditors before the improvements in productivity would cover the cost of employing someone to run Audit Master Plan. So don't get so hooked in to using IT that it becomes a non-cost-effective solution. Developing the audit, we can use it to identify and define the audit universe, What are the auditable entities? Where are they? What are the processes? What are the risk factors? And then we can go back and establish our audit frequency based on our standard business processes, based on the audit presence, and based on, quite frankly, the risk. Creating the plan, we can use our audit tools and techniques to identify, quantify, and compare risks, to do that risk assessment. And there's a stack of tools out there for doing it. Complete online planning systems, risk evaluation software, spreadsheet software can work very well. Databases, anything from Microsoft Access upwards, modeling packages of all kinds can assist you developing the plan. But once again, it's a tool to help you develop the plan. It's not something where the plan is there to help you run the tool. It's got to fit your needs. Planning software can define and evaluate risk, can assist you in evaluating relative importance, can help you identify and analyze skill levels and shortages, developing long and short-term audit plans. Now, some of it you may develop in-house, some of it may be a standard package, some of it may be an interface into industry standard software components. There's a lot of things that you can do with Excel. Jim has got a whole series of webinars on use of Excel in information analysis. You can use it to handle large volumes of data and identify complex interrelationships within the data. What's the big advantage if you're going to automate your planning? Consistent evaluation of risk. You know for a fact that you're evaluating your risk the same way every time. You can do impact modeling. If that thing went bad, how bad would it go? We can do our planning and manage our planning, looking at what has to be done, what do we have available to do it, who do we have available to do it, what skills will we require to do it, when will we require those skills, and you can demonstrably optimize the utilization of the resources that you have. If somebody challenges, why are you auditing there, not over there, you can back that up. You can demonstrate why. And your performance can be easily measured against that plan. Successful auditing, whether it's computer auditing or not, requires detailed scheduling. Well, we've got the tools for it. We've got spreadsheets. We've got data management software. We've got project management software. You can also assist defining skills requirements. You can have a problem with some of the packages that are out there. Depending on which one you go for, individual scheduling is not always available. And if it does come out and schedule the work, it's not always easy to say, well, that person's not going to be available. They're getting married that week, or they're going to be off on maternity leave. It's not always easy to identify schedule conflicts, and you can end up with the same person scheduled into 3 different projects simultaneously. Audit Master Plan, which I've mentioned, AMP, does work, and it works very well, but you've got to spend an awful lot of time putting the stuff in to get the good stuff out. You can use other things for short-term planning and scheduling. If you're going to use Gantt charts, then Excel's perfect. Risk factors and portfolio management, all of these capable of being put into your planning software. If you're going to use IT to assist you in developing and managing your human resources, there are 2 primary aids that IT can assist in that area: risk-based planning, performance tracking and development, and that means training your personnel. We track performance to identify what the auditors are doing well, what the auditors are doing badly, where we need areas of improvement, and therefore what departmental training we need. As far as training personnel is concerned, you can use computer-based self-study software. You can train in the use of IT. You can, I beg your pardon, it's not trailing. You can train in many business areas. You can even develop your own in-house courses for your own staff. As far as looking at the administrative procedures are concerned, from improving the internal audit function, the problem that we've always got is the policies and procedures for internal audit. Have to be accurate, have to be current, have to be available. Well, we can issue them on CDs. We can put them up on a website and allow our auditors to access them. So we can use standard usage, word processing, electronic storage, whatever you want. Nice thing about sticking them up on a website or putting them out in the cloud is that you know that every auditor, when they look at them, they're looking at the latest version and they're all looking at the same version. The problem with giving them a copy, giving them the procedures on a PDF or whatever, is it guaranteed within a couple of years half of them are looking at last year's and some of them are looking at the year before. They're not all looking at the latest. As far as the CATs, we're going to need CATs for our technical reviews. They could be an aid to our generalists. They could be a big aid to non-IT auditors. They can certainly be an aid to audit management, and they can enforce the standards. So the question then is, which CATs? Well, we've talked about CATs before. If you're looking at testing IT systems, we could be using test data generators. We could be using base case system evaluation tools. We could be using ITFs, integrated test facilities. We could be doing parallel simulations. We could be using our CATs to select transactions for future checking. We can be saying, give me a sample, a statistically valid sample of purchase orders so that I can go and check the authorization. It's not in the computer, it's going to be outside. I'm looking for signatures. We can create embedded audit data selection where there is no paper audit trail to look at the end of the year or at the end of a quarter or at the end of a month. The audit trail is electronic and it may exist and be gone. For that, I may create something called the SCARF, a System Collection Audit Review File, and we will embed it into our live system to facilitate the auditors looking at it. Now, for those of you who are interested, AuditNet's got a webinar today, later on increasing audit effectiveness using data analytics, and it's a free one. So I'm not suggesting you run off now, but when we're finished here, you might want to have a look at that. The person who's presenting it is a guy called Steve Zapolsky, who is not only an auditor, but he's got a strong understanding of audit application software and how to use it. Okay. I think Jim has now sent it out to everyone in case you're interested in registering. Okay. That's one of the reasons why this one is half an hour earlier, so that that one can roll on. So we've got all of these CATs that could be used. The ones that we could develop ourselves could include things like mapping job processes against control opportunities, control flow charting, data analysis of job accounting, code comparisons, log file analysis. These are now getting into the technical areas. To do the technical auditing, you're going to have to use CATs. So the trick is not just to go for anything because it is computerized, but use IT where it can be useful. Use IT where it can be justified, where there is no paper audit trail, where you have no choice with the volumes that you're handling, you have to use IT. Where the information is scattered to hell and gone across the organization and we need to bring it together. Where time dictates, and for that matter, where time allows. And that one brings us to our fourth polling question. And our fourth polling question is looking specifically at cats. Cats may be not an immediate priority, always cost effective, or rarely cost effective. Please vote now. Another few seconds. I'll close it and share the results. And as you would expect, not necessarily an immediate objective. Okay, let me close that and we'll carry on. So what else do we have to consider when we start thinking about running our department? We've now got the people, we've got their objectives, we've got our cats. Now we have to measure, as management, our job performance. We have to manage auditors' acquisition of knowledge as they develop new abilities, whether they are achieving their goal objectives, and that can involve the employee in taking an active part on how we are going to measure this. We can get into performance measurement counselling. Hershey and Blanchard's situational leadership, etc., where criteria need to be agreed between management and the auditor. And remember, in looking specifically at IT audit, the career path may not always be upwards. Sometimes it's sideways. And management feedback is a critical component of performance measurement counselling, both for the formal review and with informal reviews. And the reason I say that is because many auditors will accept criticism informally. Over a drink, the boss says, "You made a real mess of that, didn't you?" "Yeah, I certainly did." Learn my lesson there. If it's a formal review, there's no way I'm accepting that because my salary increase is going to be based on that formal review. So the best kind is a combination of the two. Professional development you can measure by the growth within the professional community, membership in professional bodies. When I say membership, I don't mean just joining, I mean active participation. Gaining professional qualifications and hitting those performance goals. I was doing a course in Zimbabwe some years ago, and it was a 5-day course, and at the end of it, one of the guys said to me, "The problem in Zimbabwe is we don't get enough people coming up here to give courses." I said, "Well, why don't you give them yourselves?" "Oh, how can we give courses?" I said, "Well, you've been on a course for 5 days. You now know a whole pile of things that other people in Zimbabwe don't know. Why don't you train them? You know a whole pile of things that the rest of your auditors don't know. Why don't you train your auditors?" So it's not a question simply of, as Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. In your professional development, It's not just a question of how well can I be developed. It's a question of the best way to learn is to teach. So who else can you teach? Ongoing, you can get graduate or postgraduate qualifications. Education-related awards and recognition, you can get your CIA, your CRMA, CISM, CISA, CISSP, MCOMs, whatever it takes. There's plenty of qualifications out there. Developing your working relationships with an internal audit, with IT, with the users, with external audit, and in all cases it's going to be based on them believing that you know what you're doing and you believing that they know what they're doing. Within internal audit, that comes as an integral part. We have a tendency towards total system auditing, a task force approach. You can be an integral part of that. It strengthens the audit approach and allows the cross-training of auditors without them having to go on courses. We can use complementary strengths. They know the business areas, we know the IT areas. We can combine to come up with the appropriate audit techniques. We know the computer file formats, we know what can be interrogated, we know the computer processes. With IT, we've got to get away from this isolated existence in the closed shop tradition. Typically, IT generally has poor communication skills. It's not always the case, but in many IT organizations, they seem to see an iron curtain between them and the organization. They report through different reporting structures to the auditors. You have to win their respect and confidence, because if they are not confident in you, you've got problems. And antagonistic IT is deadly to audit. They can make your audits into highly ineffective, superficial, and your IT audit function will wither on the vine. You need to get the respect. So how do you get the respect? Technical competence. You don't have to be technically competent in their area, but you do have to be technically competent in your own area. Honest reporting. I was called into a client to express an opinion on their IT department. I was called in by their IT department. And the reason I was called in was because their external auditors had been in and done exactly the same exercise a few weeks before. And I said, did they give you a hard time and you're looking for me to give you a soft time? He said, no. He said, they found nothing wrong. And we know that this thing's wrong. We want someone to come in and tell us what it is. We don't want to score brownie points. You're not trying to look good. Stay out of the internal politics and keep yourself current. That's critical to win the respect of the IT function. As far as the user departments, you've got to be careful, because in many cases the users will try to abdicate that responsibility. They'll try to pass it to IT. They'll try to pass it to audit. They'll try to pass it to quality assurance. They'll try to pass it to anybody. It's not our job to take over their responsibilities. We can help them handle their own responsibilities, partly through bridging the communication gaps between IT and the user area, demystifying IT to them, partly by explaining control concepts, because you can go and do a master's degree if you wish in business administration, and 9 times out of 10 nobody will talk to you about control, internal control. We can clarify the areas of responsibilities, who's doing what and why. As far as the relationships with the external auditors are concerned, generally there's a differing set of objectives, with the auditors, the external auditors, handling their fiduciary role. Their external range may be limited by statute. They are responsible to the shareholders, ratepayers, whoever it happens to be. Their responsibility as a fiduciary audit is to attest the balance sheet and express an opinion on the financial statements. The problem from an external audit perspective is that the figures that they are attesting are coming out of a computer system. Question, can they trust them? In practice, the role between external and internal may be complementary, and then externals may place a lot of reliance on the internal audit function from an IT perspective if the external auditor is satisfied with the IT audit competence, satisfied with the internal departmental standards, and satisfied with the degree of audit independence from that internal IT audit. The independence may be a function of the reporting structure, or it may simply be a state of mind. Most external auditors will tell you that they are more independent than internal audit. That may not be true. It depends on the reporting structure and how internal audit sees itself. It must not be compromised internally, and it must be agreed up front with management. As far as all of these bodies are concerned, but in particular with the external audit, liaison is critical. And it's ongoing. It may be formal, it may be informal, but it is a two-way track. If it's done effectively, it reduces the total cost, and it should produce a better audit. The audit committee can help in this area. External audit concerns. Now, this came from a study that was done for a master's degree by a friend of mine. He looked at sending a questionnaire out to external auditors looking at IT audit, and he sent it to internal auditors looking at IT audit. IT audit from an external perspective, their primary concerns in most, this is not across the board, but in many of them, the internal auditors in IT are not competent, are not sufficiently trained, are not subject to any code of ethics, and are not independent. And the interesting thing was, when he sent the same questionnaire out to internal audit, they agreed. They also thought that they were not sufficiently trained, not independent, not subject to any code of ethics, even though the people he sent them out to were all members of the Institute of Internal Auditors who'd agreed to be bound by the code of ethics of the IIA, and members of ISACA who'd agreed to be bound by the code of ethics of ISACA. Now that's external auditors concerned. IT themselves have a different set of concerns. This was a presentation that was done by a friend of mine to a conference in Germany. He was head of IT for a large company, and his objection was that IT auditors do not find fraud. Now, I'm not saying this is true. This was his impression. They do not enhance his image with his clients. They do not reduce IT costs because he's got to pay for the audit. They do not work independently because they come in and my staff, my IT staff, have to take them through how to do it. They do not improve IT's value for money. They do not come fully trained. They expect my staff to train them. They don't help with project control. They get in the way. They don't stick to their own business. They interfere with mine. They don't express their feelings. And they equate real risks with history. They don't equate real risks with practicality. He said, I had one auditor who came in and said, according to this book, a computer disaster will occur once every 200 years. He said, good. Tell me how that works. We haven't had computers for 200 years. So that's his concerns. I'm not saying that that's all IT's concerns, but a lot of IT people have expressed that concern to me. Question, what are you doing as an IT auditor manager to overcome those concerns? It's a communication issue. And that brings us to our fifth polling question. And our fifth polling question is looking at professional development and how do we measure it. We can measure it by the number of courses attended, the length of time doing the job, acquisition of professional qualifications, or self-assessment. Now, those are not the only ways of doing it, but of that lot, what would you say was the most effective way of doing it? I'll close the poll and share the results. And lo and behold, 77% believe in the attaining of professional qualifications. And that's probably the most easily justified way of proving professional competence. So, with all of that in mind, we've now got all of our people up, we've got them qualified, we know what we're doing, we've got our scope, we've got everything else sorted out. Now, what about these specialists that we talked about? What are we going to do with them? Well, I've talked about several of these in the past. The role of the specialist, they're the ones who will typically conduct the technical reviews, be the technical support for the IT audit function, develop our CATs, possibly develop an IT training program for the audit group, and do the coordination with the external IT audit. But when they come to do technical reviews, what kind of technical reviews are you going to use them for? It could be technical enforcement of our standard administrative controls. It could be doing reviews of the operating systems environment itself, possibly our telecommunication systems. Performance audits and audits of high-risk systems. And in many cases these days when we're getting into cloud computing, you're going to have to use your specialists because those are high-risk systems with lots of telecommunication involvement. But they can also assist in audits, not just do them themselves. They can assist in things like data center reviews, change control reviews, doing the first time audit of an application system where the auditor says, well, it looks as though the conventional IT auditor says it looks as though it's okay, but can I trust it? Let me bring in the specialist to go and check these things. They can do security reviews, they can do acquisition reviews. As far as technical support is concerned, they're basically a sounding board for our non-specialist auditors. If they've got any questions, that's where they bounce them. They can confirm high-tech queries. They can provide that confidence factor. In many cases, the questions that are being asked by our non-specialist IT auditors are being asked because they simply don't have the confidence in themselves. That takes time to build. So it's a safety factor if you've got a technical person that you can bounce these questions off. They can also investigate complex system interfaces and provide the support not just for the non-specialist IT auditor, but for the non-IT auditor, and gathering and analyzing data, developing formats, testing systems, developing CATs, and investigating inconsistencies in output notes by non-IT auditors. Hang on, that doesn't make sense. You looked at this and you found that, but that can't work like that. As far as training is concerned, developing and organizing a training program to raise that literacy, train in the latest techniques, and that means that the specialist auditor themselves have to be up to speed in the latest techniques. Develop that in-house technical expertise, liaising with the external auditors to ensure that their needs are met, that we're not duplicating effort. Learn from the external auditors. They've got a broad experience at the technical level in a variety of environments, learn from their experience, communicate their tools and techniques to the rest of internal audit so that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet and we're improving our working relationships. As far as research is concerned, this is the critical one for the specialist auditor. Research into what's happening now and what's going to be happening 4 or 5 years down the line. Computerized audit techniques, hardware and software availability supporting the IT direction, not where they are now, but where they're going to be 5 years from now. Into IT audit training techniques and aids, IT risk evaluation techniques and aids, and the role that the IT auditor is going to play now and into the future. They need communication skills to take those technical issues and explain them to the layman. They're going to have to get a budget from somewhere. They have to be able to explain the technical needs to the management level, able to authorize their budget. They have to talk hex to the IT professionals. They've got to be able to talk in the same jargon that the IT people do. They've got to be able to translate that into the language that the auditors use and interpret control deficiencies into business risks without trying to put the fear of God into people. This is not an exercise to show how I am more technically savvy than you are, and therefore anything I say must be gospel. As a consultant, the technician, the specialist can be brought in to assist in system control reviews, IT audit assistance, implementation reviews, reviews of DRP and corporate survival, and reviews of IT management techniques. It sounds wonderful, it's an interesting career, it's where we should all desire to go, but there are problems. Career paths are a problem. Remuneration is a problem. I've seen departments where the IT technical specialist out-earns the head of internal audit because you can't get new ones. You've got to keep the ones you've got. And everyone is headhunting them. Availability is a problem. The prima donna syndrome, where I am the expert, you must listen to me, can be a real problem. And motivating these people can be a nightmare. Unless, of course, you're also a technical auditor. Which brings us to our final polling question for the whole process, for the whole 10 series. Looking at specialist auditors. Specialist IT auditors may be required to focus on IT audit, conduct technical reviews, replace the work of the external auditor, or focus on first-time audits of application systems. And you'll see there is none there for all of the above. I will close the poll and share the results. And as you'll see, the majority of people have gone for conducting technical reviews, which is probably the most common use that is made of the technical specialists. So, having reached the end of the 10 webinar series, and for those who are here only on this webinar, any questions? Don't be shy. Silence was the loud reply. Well, thank you for your participation. If you have any questions that occur to you afterwards on any of the webinars that we've covered in this series, please contact myself or Jim. The contact details are on the screen. That 303 number is a Skype number that will get me anywhere in the world.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. This has been a great series, and I'm sure that everybody gained a lot of knowledge and information. And I think it was Winston Churchill that said, "This is not the beginning of the end, but rather the end of the beginning."
Yeah, it was actually, it's not the beginning of the end. It's not the end.
It's not the
even
end.
the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
The end of the beginning, exactly. So, you know, those of you that are going to embark on an IT audit, Richard has given you all the tools that you need to get started in that, and now it's really up to you to take it forward. And you do have the benefit of the videos, we have the recordings, and we will be moving those recordings to AuditNet TV, and they will continue to be available. But Richard and I had discussed earlier, and Richard will be running this series again, and he'll probably be running it from his own site, but we will definitely make you informed. So if you have others that want to take this this series, that will be available again in the future. So again, thank you, Richard. Reminder to everybody that you will be getting your CPE certificates. They'll be sent out, as well as a link to the recording for today's session. And I want to thank you all for your participation and wish you all a great day.
Thanks, and see you in the future.
Thanks, Richard.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.